Hi, Trilogy Carlson here, and today we're revisiting the Star Trek franchise. After a lot of anticipation, we finally have the first 6 movies on 4K. This is Star Trek, the original motion picture 6-movie collection. There had previously last year been a 4-movie collection that didn't include the latter 2 of the original series films. That has now been rectified in the form of this package. So we are going to take a look at this box, do our unboxing. I'll talk a little about the movies and what you get in this set and let you know if it's recommended or not. Nice close-up there combining the main and supporting cast, both good and bad. That's very nice artwork. Here's the spine, top of the box, bottom of the box. We do get Blu-ray and 4K copies here. Each is concealed in its own individual case. Now, as is usually the case with movies released by mainstream studios, you do get digital copies of the movies as well. I might give these away in a later contest. This here is actually an essay from Robert Wise, who directed the first Star Trek movie, talking about his trials and tribulations getting that made. So we'll start by looking at the 4K box. Nice close-ups of most of the major cast there. There's the spine. Back cover has all of the credits and legalese and so forth. We'll open this up. Right here we have Star Trek the Motion Picture Director's Edition. Now, movies 1, 2, and 6 have both director's cuts and the theatrical versions. In the case of the first movie, they're split across 2 discs because they're substantially different, whereas the other ones are just via seamless branching. Although only the 4K disc has the director's cut of Star Trek 6, the Blu-ray only has the theatrical cut. So here's that. We then have the theatrical version of Star Trek the Motion Picture, the first movie from 1979. Then from 1982, we have Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Again, available here in a director's cut and theatrical version. From 1984, we have Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. From 1986, we have Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. 1989, we have Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. And from 1991, we have Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which would end up being the final film to feature the complete classic cast, many of whom unfortunately have since passed on. We then have the Blu-ray case here, and pretty much the same design for the most part. We open this up, pretty much the same thing. Star Trek the Motion Picture Director's Edition, Star Trek the Motion Picture Director's Edition bonus disc. And the bonus features, with the exceptions of things like commentaries, are all relegated to the Blu-ray discs. Theatrical version of Star Trek the Motion Picture, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, and Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. I do kind of wish they'd done something with this transparent case. Maybe had like some Star Trek artwork in the background, livened that up a bit. But anyway, like I said, you do get all 6 films here. This was the first time that the classic cast of the show had reunited for original Star Trek content since the original series and the animated series that aired around 1973, although Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, was not in the cast of the animated series. Star Trek the Motion Picture, released in 1979, starts off the set, and it sees the crew of the Enterprise reuniting after a long absence, going out into space to investigate the mystery of a space probe. Captain Kirk has since become Admiral Kirk, but he certainly misses being at the command of a starship, much to the chagrin of the Enterprise's new captain, who isn't too crazy about someone taking over his authority. What is the mystery of this space probe, and how will they stop it? The first Star Trek film, whether you're watching the director's cut or the theatrical cut, is admittedly not the best. This particular movie, it couldn't quite decide if it wanted to be like, a space opera action adventure, something along the lines of Star Wars or Flash Gordon, or if it wanted to be something a little more philosophical like 2001: A Space Odyssey. It doesn't quite succeed at either, though I won't deny it is a beautiful looking, beautifully made film. Legendary director Robert Wise is at the helm for this one. He'd directed movies like The The Day the Earth Stood Still, Run Silent, Run Deep, The Sound of Music, West Side Story. He was even an editor on Citizen Kane. So this guy was like Hollywood elite back in the day. It's a beautiful looking, beautifully produced film, but even with the director's cut version, which does improve the movie considerably, still not my favorite Star Trek movie. Those issues were largely rectified with the arrival of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan in 1982. This time around, Khan, who along with a group of superhumans that were once exiled by Captain Kirk in the events of the original TV series, have been reawakened, and they've come around to commandeer the Enterprise and set themselves into motion, getting their hands on something called the Genesis device that can supposedly create life. This movie has a much more straightforward, action-oriented tone, and it's far more accessible than the first movie was. Ricardo Montalban really shines as Khan. There's absolutely nothing subtle about his performance here, but it just makes me like it all the more. We get some great action moments, not to mention a tear-jerking finale that certainly stands as one of science fiction's high watermarks. Films 2, 3, and 4 form a loose trilogy of sorts revolving around the Genesis technology. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock continues on this path, with the group going to investigate the Genesis planet that was created at the end of the previous film, learning that there may be some mysterious life signs going on that have ties to an old friend of the group. Unfortunately, someone else has his sights on the Genesis device, that being a ruthless Klingon warlord played by Christopher Lloyd in one of his pre-Back to the Future roles. Roger Ebert actually described Star Trek III as a compromise between the tones of the first and second film, exploring some of the more philosophical themes of the first, but also somewhat maintaining the action-oriented tone of the second. A lot of people say the odd-numbered Star Trek movies are all bad, and the even ones are all good, but Star Trek III, I think, is actually a very good film despite that. It's not quite as standalone because a lot of it does stem from the plot of Wrath of Khan and, of course, fade into the next film, but this one I always thought to be a little underrated, and it does deserve a little more respect than it gets. We next arrive at Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. This time around, the Enterprise crew has to go back in time to the 20th century so that they can find humpback whales, the only creatures that are capable with communicating with a dangerous space probe that's approaching Earth. That probe obviously unaware that whales, the only creatures it once communicated with, have long since gone extinct. This time around, it's almost more of a fish-out-of-water comedy story, but of course we still do get the sci-fi elements and the dramatic beats. That makes this one of the most accessible films in the collection, and certainly a favorite of mine. I was really happy to revisit this one. I also wanted to add that Star Trek 3 and 4 were both directed by Leonard Nimoy, the actor who played Spock. Star Trek V: The Final Frontier is directed by William Shatner, who of course played Captain Kirk. This time around, Spock's mysterious half-brother, who was exiled from Vulcan because he didn't want to conceal his emotions, is on a quest to find God. Yes, literally, to find God. So he attempts to commandeer the Starship Enterprise and go on a quest well past the borders of the galaxy to find what he believes to be the supreme being. This film is usually torn apart as the worst of the classic 6 Star Trek films. I don't know that I can really argue with that, but I think it is a better film than people claim it is. It's still entertaining. There are some great sequences, and Sybok, the Vulcan villain, I think is actually very entertaining, and there are some great elements and scenes to be had here. No, it's not as good as the other films, but I would not say that it's bad. It has to be in the company of films that are much better, and that certainly works against it. It does feature the return of Jerry Goldsmith to the franchise, who'd previously scored Star Trek: The Motion Picture back in 1979. Goldsmith, of course, coined the main theme for these two films, which would later be used in Star Trek: The Next Generation. The classic series concludes with Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. This time around, there are peace talks between Klingons and the Federation, and of course, there's a lot of distrust on both sides. When a conspiracy is set into motion in which Captain Kirk finds himself accused of attacking Klingon envoys, it's up to the rest of the Starfleet crew to find ways to rescue Kirk. But is there more at hand here? This film brought back director Nicholas Meyer, who'd previously directed The Wrath of Khan, arguably the best film in the series, and that certainly reflected well here. The Undiscovered Country easily ranks amongst the best films in the classic Star Trek series, and it's the perfect swan song to this great cast of actors who brought these characters to life for so long. Of course, Leonard Nimoy would later reprise his role as his version of Spock in the rebooted J.J. Abrams-directed Kelvin trilogy, and of course would make an impact there as well. There are some great moments to be had here. I admit the movies are a little hit and miss at times, but there is more good than bad, and I was really happy to revisit these for their 4K debuts. Again, the first 4 films were previously released in another set, and those exact same discs have been reissued here, with the exception of the director's cut of the motion picture, which is new to this set. There's also a standalone deluxe set of just the motion picture, which also has an extended, longer cut of the movie. That is not to be found in this set, unfortunately, but if you buy that set, you don't get the 1080p version of Star Trek the Motion Picture, so there is no one complete set that has everything, unfortunately. For the most part, these movies look very good in the 4K format, and I'm very happy to see what they've done here to remaster these. Unlike the older Blu-rays, which were largely the result of scrubbing and digital noise reduction and barely looked filmic, these have had proper restorations. And while there still are a few dull, dirty-looking scenes, a lot of stuff largely is the result of outdated special effects, overall they look very good, particularly a lot of the scenes in low light and in outer space involving spacecraft look very good. I am happy to see that these movies did get the treatment they deserve. I don't believe there's a whole lot of brand new special features in this set, but you do get a ton of them. Again, they're relegated to the Blu-ray discs, and you're going to be busy for hours going through all this stuff because Paramount really unlocked the vault and brought all this stuff together, and I'm happy to see that it's an absolutely great supplemental package. I can't say that everything that's ever been done about the movies ever has been included here, but it is a very good selection of special features, one that I think any fan will be happy with. What is your favorite Star Trek film from the classic cast? What do you think of this 4K set? Have you picked it up yet? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel for more content because I'm always posting new videos, and make sure you give this one a like if you found it helpful. I'm Taylor T. Carlson. I'll see you next time.